So you all share the same birthday. What does that mean to you?
December 19th. It means amazing love. It means that it's a funny story behind it. She's the one who, when her mother was giving birth, the mother squeezed my hand so hard it cut a ring and I bled all over the floor. So we have that intimate connection. We're blood on blood. No, it means it was really an intriguing thing, and it's something that she and I share. We did T-shirts together. We did sweatshirts together at 6. I'm not even sure she will remember that. It was we had an expression. She couldn't talk English real good. She said, "We a team," and so I made a T-shirt and a sweatshirt that said "We a team" with a picture that she drew of me and her. And it has always been that way. We have always treated each other like we a team, and that to me is really special. When I was walking home from the hospital that day, Luther Vandross was on the radio. I think it was The Quiet Storm, and the song "Amazing Love" came on, and that's not even a feature on his album, but for some reason that was on, and we share that particular song whenever it comes around. That's our little dance song, etc. Another way to remember each other.
So you and your father share the same birthday. What does that mean to you?
You know, means I'm the favorite. You know what I mean? Middle of 5 kids. I don't know where the rest of them came from, but obviously it's special because, when you're one of many children, you gotta find ways to connect, with your parents individually, collectively. That's just always been our thing. We're 39 years blessed to have that shared connection and shared experience. I think also to that end, we're in a society that has often somehow said that Black fathers don't exist. And I've always said that I have a father. I have someone who has been full-time in my life, present, active, and engaged. And that's what that represents for me, especially as a Black woman. It's been a special connection for me to understand myself through looking at the lens of who my father was, how it is that he represented himself as a man, as a father, and then also just as a person, and just kind of studying him a little bit. And in our, Sagittarius way, I'll be able to say that I feel like you. I feel like I get this from you, like, don't I? Because those are kind of things that are very special to me that I don't take for granted. That's why we named the podcast 1219. Because that's that intergenerational connection that we share. To have the same day as my father, the man who is very pivotal in how it is that I show up in the world, has been the best blessing. Welcome, everybody. You are now tuned in to the 1219 podcast, 2 generations, 1 conversation. I am one half of your soon-to-be favorite podcast, Imani B. That's what they know me out in the world. Writer, mother, Muslim, all the things, storyteller, world traveler, and I have the honor of doing this together with my dad.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, and welcome to each and every one to your, what Imani says is going to be your favorite podcast.
That's right.
I'm Muhammad Bashir, retired attorney, not retired journalist. I'm the author of the book Raw Law and Urban Guide to Criminal Justice. I do a podcast every Thursday evening called The Raw Law Project at hsrn.com, same shameless plug, and author of April 4th, Lessons on Living and Dying. Go out and cop. Don't let me down.
Yeah, listen, we're here for a good plug. But yeah, we wanted to do this podcast because ultimately, I'm in the social media streets. I'm a millennial. And then you, Dad, you're a boomer, right? And we thought of how it is that sometimes we miss the conversations that we can have intergenerationally. And we both thought that a podcast of, especially as father and daughter, and 1219, obviously I would be remiss to say is our birthday. So as, the favorite child, shout out to my other siblings, as the favorite child and having the same birthday in 1219, happy birthday to us. We wanted to share the insight, when I'm on social media and I'm screaming out into the world, this is the person that I usually have on the phone in the background where I need to collect myself, where I need to ground myself. And I think we need to see a lot more of that, where it is that us as this generation, whether it's millennials, Gen Z, Gen Alpha, still reach to the elder generation for guidance, for insight, and sometimes just to scream, just to, get off whatever it is that we need to get off. So to that end, like, when we talk about generations, what does that represent for you?
You know what? Before I addressed it, I just figured you out.
Huh.
So in other words, you using me, all right, for your podcast and your intellect. So you coming across intellectual.
And my street cred.
Oh, it was definitely street cred. So you using me. I get it now. Now I finally get it. Okay, it took me a minute. Critical thinking was part of what it was to be a baby boomer. So I had to read between the lines. We grew up with COINTELPRO. So now I got you. In any event, I think that's a really important. I still remember the stories my dad transferred to me. Which were transferred from his dad. And I still, to this day, say the older I get, the smarter my dad gets. As a way of saying, look, I can see now what he imparted to me and the necessity of me being around for those people who were coming along after me to be able to say, hey, this is how you move in the society that we all live in. So generational conversations mean just that we need to be able to transfer that which we don't want to die on to the next generation so they don't have to relive the situations that we went through and probably move the struggle, move society, move culture forward. And I believe, frankly, that's really the only way that we can do it.
You're born 1953, raised in the heart of the civil rights movement, right? When we talk about generationally, I think that also speaks to how it is that you raised us. Mm-hmm. I'm an 86 baby, raised in the 90s, right? Let's speak to the conversations that maybe you had with your father as a child. What were the things that were imparted to you by him that you felt you needed to impart to us?
My mother and my father were readers, working people, but they were readers, and they required that I read damn near everything. I remember JFK getting assassinated in '63, and my mother made me do a scrapbook on JFK. And when I finished the scrapbook, I did the scrapbook, and it was all these glowing articles and stories about JFK, how he was for civil rights, and he was a great leader, and this, that, and the third, and PT 109, and he served in the service, and all these great things about Camelot, etc. And I was so proud of this particular book, this scrapbook that I did. I mean, it was laid out, all the articles you can possibly find. And I gave it to my mom, and she was proud of me because I put the work in. And I laid it down the next morning. I get up, my dad was sitting there reading it. And he said, boy, get over here. And I said, thinking I'm going to hear something really proud. And he said, let me tell you something about white privilege. Let me tell you something about how this family got their money, how this family exploited others to get to the top so that this kid, JFK, could be the person that he is. And then the infamous Malcolm X quote, chickens coming home to roost, talking about the Kennedy assassination. Mm-hmm. And he played that. Do you understand what he means about the violence that America was heaping on? That was kind of like my first introduction to political theory and critical thinking. And ever since that, I was like, oh man, my dad just ruined. No, you know what?
Sounds like somebody I know.
See, because you always tell, all of y'all, all five of you all always say, I ruined everything, every holiday, everything like that, because I'm going to tell you what the backdrop is or what the story is so that you get the real deal and you don't walk away into the world with fantasies on your mind. Well, now you know that it didn't start with me. It started with my dad, who was making sure that I was grounded in the real world and made sure that even if I recognize one side, there may also be another side. And I hope that you all pull from that. And I hope this generation pulls the same kind of thought process, that there may not only be one side of a particular story, So.
And I think that's the important thing of, I think, when I'm out in this world doing the work that I do on social media, talking to people, making attempts to try to educate people, right? You use the word grounding, which I find a lot of people don't recognize that education is a level of grounding. Having that balance of education to really understand the reality of what things are keeps your feet firmly planted on the ground. I don't know if I recognize that, obviously, maneuvering through society in the 90s, when you're taught that Columbus sailed the ocean blue, and when you're taught to put your hand over your heart and say the Pledge of Allegiance, and you don't want to be the only kid sitting down. But when you go home, you're pretty much, this is bullshit. This is how this happened. And I remember when we did homework, you would say, this is the real story, but this is how we're going to do it so you can get your grade and move along. And I think that balance, in some semblance, is kind of missing in the generation now, because one, I think people want to be infantilized. People want to be pacified. Right. And then when you come off strongly and passionately about the things, you're a conspiracy theorist, you are negative, why can't we just, know? And the conversations that we had in our home, I recognize now that was very special and very nuanced, because I think a lot of my peers are just now having those conversations.
So in other words, you're saying the older you get, the smarter your dad gets. No. Now see, now you see
started with that at the beginning.
Absolutely,
I never said that.
absolutely. Now you see the transfer, all right? But I'll tell you something that maybe I probably haven't said, maybe I need to say a little bit more. First of all, I can't even express to you how proud I am of you being willing to take a stance in the social media platform. There was no social media when I was coming up. I mean, honestly, there were newspapers and things like that, and you did things by the phone. That's how you communicated with people, and you met people, etc. So for you to jump out there in social media knowing what the potential outcomes are with the government, with protests, with giving people information that they may not have gotten in their own households or in their own colleges or in their own high schools, etc. That's a tremendous source of pride. But it's also, truth be told, now I get an understanding of what my dad was when he was like, boy, you may want to tone that down a little bit. You don't know. He used to say, you don't know the white man like I know the white man. It's like that. And he's from the South, so he's like the 30s, 40s South. All right, so he's telling me that, and it's not resonating for me. But now it has resonated, and now as you guys are growing up, I'm passing on that same kind of thing, because the climate hasn't changed and the mentality of people hasn't changed. The mentality that Du Bois talked about in his book on Reconstruction of white America hasn't changed. The mentality of black people that Carter G. Woodson talked about in The Miseducation of the Negro hasn't changed. But that's why the struggle continues. That's why we have to constantly be vigilant. And that's why, even though I'm frightened like hell for you being out there in these streets like that, I grew up in the hood. There was always something in the streets. So I temper that with, I had to run my race, you got to run your race. So, I don't know if I ever said it before, but I really am proud of the work that you do.
Well, that's always appreciated as the favorite.
All right, so just cut the check. Cut the check.
But to be fair, your level of fear is interesting, because obviously you're a parent, and now me being a parent, I understand that just natural level of fear that you have for your child. But I am as boisterous as I am as confident as I am, because I have you.
Wow, mashallah.
Because you are here, and I know that if some stuff hit the fan, I'm gonna call you immediately. The other day when I was out here in the streets, I was like, Dad, I almost got arrested, right? I have the privilege of being raised by an attorney that was in criminal and constitutional law specifically. So learning the ropes from you of how to navigate not just whiteness, but a system overall.
Right.
And like I said, to that end, I find that, my peers, people of my generation specifically, are just now learning these things as we've had Trayvon Martin, as we've had Freddie Gray, Breonna Taylor, George Floyd. More people are starting to see things in a way that I was constantly raised in. So for me, it's like the fire that I have is like 39 years worth of having to really understand the system from the inside of my house before I walked out the door.
So do you think that, like, we just lost two icons that were from my generation, for lack of a better way to put it, that is Jamil Abdul Alameen, Assata Shakur, who were icons during that era. Do you think that your generation understands the loss, the struggle and the loss of those two icons?
I don't know fully if we get it and what that means. I know I do. I know when I heard about the passing of Assata Shakur, it took me a while to sit with that because I just always had it in my mind I was going to meet her. I was going to Cuba. I was going to meet her. Alhamdulillah, I was able to get to Cuba after her passing. But I think because, you constantly reinforce the education of who our people are, who our freedom fighters were, and what they represented to what it is that we had and have. And so I think for those of the folks that are in my generation that didn't get that reinforcement to really understand the people that put it on the line. And when we're talking about put it on the line, we're talking about the blood on the line, that people that were willing to die behind the message, right? I don't know if my generation has that full understanding and capacity for understanding because we have so much privilege.
Yeah. I saw a video. You kind of like got me on the TikTok and all that kind of stuff because believe me, I would have never touched that foolishness because I don't understand it. But I was thumbing through it maybe about 2 or 3 years ago, and then maybe about last week I saw it again. A guy by the name of Magic Mike or something like that. I guess he's a rapper or something because they said he had won a Grammy or something like that.
Okay.
And he was talking and he gave this real rousing speech about black people not being ready for revolution. You may recall it. And he was talking about, y'all not ready for revolution. Y'all ain't got no this, y'all ain't got no that, da. And it made me reflect back on 63, 65. And ask myself, were black people ready for revolution? Or did revolution present itself and black people had to embrace it? You know what I mean? You are never really ready for revolution. Revolution isn't something that you go out and you plan. I'm just going to plan the revolt. No. Nat Turner was ready for revolution. All right? The Haitians in 1891, wherever it was, 1891, the Haitian Revolution, they were ready for revolution. Times brought about them being ready. They didn't sit around and talk about, wait, let me get a farm and grow my own corn, and then by that time I get the corn out, then I'll be ready for revolution. And I think, this is not to be critical of the brother. This is to say that the concept of revolution, you have to embed it in your heart. Because the only people in America who really need to see America change, is the so-called black man and black woman in America. They need to see America change because they are on the bottom rung of every scale. And the system hasn't changed since 1619. Black people have always been on the bottom level of every scale. They're giving us these arguments of individual achievement, but that's not a collective achievement. The collective demonstrates that the system in and of itself treats black people like they are a colony and that they cannot raise collectively above a particular level. And so therefore, the times can sometimes push you in a position that, that the planning can never put you in. And frankly, the nature of the culture is that it has always been ready to counter revolution. COINTELPRO, the Red Scares, all those other things are direct relationships to people beginning to see that something is wrong and being willing to do like you do, step out on the street and be willing to change it. But the culture has seen it. And remember the old movie, The Empire Strikes Back, the Star Wars thing? That was really a metaphor for them coming back after what black people did to America in the 60s. So you never can be ready for revolution. You just have to revolt. You just have to do what they do in Indonesia or wherever it was. They did Nepal to set the place. Sometimes you just have to set it off.
My only pushback to that is because, when you're on social media now, people often be like, oh, there's bots and there's this. And I'm like, yeah, there's bots and things like that. And there's also people on the internet. And when I read some of the comments that I get, it's like folks don't get it. And so to your point where you feel strongly where you just have to do the thing, I think some people need the education because they don't see the necessity. Number one, they don't understand what's on the other side, to the point of you saying with granddad, like, you don't know the white man the way I know the white man. I don't know if folks really understand how insidious white supremacy, whiteness, racism is in this generation because of all of the access that we have.
Right.
Now, to that end, we have so much access to where it's like, hey, it's right there in front of you. You have things like books, like, you know what I mean, that you can read, that you can educate yourself. You have Miseducation of the Negro. You have Black Skin, White Mask. You have medical apartheid. You have so much out there, right? Which is why this administration and just white supremacy overall is banning our books. They're banning our history. They're removing things from our museums so that we don't know and don't fully understand. And I think that lack of education and lack of understanding of what it is that it means, especially having just gone to Cuba and spoken to some elders who say this generation has lost the fight because they don't understand. They don't understand what we did and what it took for us to get the revolution that we had here. Now they want to be influencers. They want to do TikTok. They just want to make some money. So they're leaving, right? And it's no different than what it is that we have here. Everybody want to be an influencer. People don't want to have influence. I just want to work with a brand. I'm going to make some money. I'm going to give me this house. And I'm going to, so to that end, I think one of the things that we do miss in learning about your generation is it makes it seem that everybody was willing to just put it on the line. Everybody participated in the Montgomery bus boycott. Everybody was willing to not take the bus and walk. But we don't hear about the people who were unwilling.
Right.
Who were like, nah, I'm not doing that.
Right.
I got a good job.
Right.
I got to get there on time. Right? Because I see it with this generation where it's like, I feel like I'm trying to pull people along to really understand what it is that it takes for us. And they're like, nah, I'm not doing that. I can get this brand deal with this brand that's really oppressing people overseas. And that's making its way back around here. But I don't care. I'm making my money. And to hell with you.
It's kind of like the old joke that everybody nowadays marched on Bloody Sunday. Everybody was on the bridge with Martin Luther King.
Right.
You know, and it's people who you never would think about would be saying, yeah, I marched with Dr. King, or so-and-so, my uncle marched with Dr. King.
The way these folks tell it, and they'll do it, and I'm sure history will do it at some point where people start rewriting and revisioning their own history of where they stood in movements as well.
Right. But you know what the difference in my generation is that the people who set it off, then there were multiple ways to have revolution. There was the Black Power movement, there was Stokely, there was the Black Panthers, who were in the community willing to pull the community along. That was revolutionary. I mean, really, what you have here in your government now with the school programs where they feed the kids and everything, that's a creation of the Black Panther Party.
Right.
The idea that you can police the police is the idea of the Black Panther Party. So you have all these organizations, that's revolutionary. To challenge that you have the right to bear arms just like anybody else is revolutionary. So I'm not saying that you have to burn the building down. What I'm saying is that you have to implement in the hearts of your people the willingness to demand change in ways that the government, not in the same language. That's why Jamil El-Amin is so important. He was saying that the reason we try to have a revolution and trying to have organizations that follow their lead, the lead of the oppressor. We use their language, we use their ways of protest, we use their ways of discussing, we use their courts, we use everything as them, and then we say we want revolution. No, we have to begin to reshape how we see this particular culture and realize that the value system that is created by this culture is not conducive to you if you are on the bottom rung as a culture of what it is to be, because they can always shut you down. They have already limited you to entertainment, influencers now, right? And sports figures. After that, you have no voice, no say, no money. You know, and that's the part that I think we got to get to the point where people begin to say, wait a minute, I'm not going to invest my dollars in this, I'm going to invest my dollars here. We're going to act collectively, we're not going to act individualistically. And I think that's the part that I think we need to come to. That would be revolutionary here in America. And I think that's the biggest fear of America, is the sense of unity. It has always been the sense of unity of Black people, because when Black people are able to state their particular discussion and put it on the record and educate people about it, people willingly bend toward, as Dr. King would say, the arc of justice bends toward truth. So people be willing to bend toward it. You might move all the way to the truth. Like white liberals, they never move all the way to the truth. But they at least begin to bend. It's like, yeah, this isn't America I've signed on for. And I think that's what's happening right now. So I think that the intergenerational, I hope that people really will read Asada. I hope they will really read Die Nigga Die by A. Brown, now Jamil El-Amin, or Revolution by the Book, which is Jamil El-Amin. But I hope they will read about these icons and see what the blueprint that they left for revolution. So it's not always the BLA, the Black Liberation Army. It's not always the acts of violence. Sometimes it's the act of changing the way you see the value system. And I hope that, if nothing else, that my dad imparted that to me. That value system that is out there in the courts with you is not your value system. You have to bring something different to it. Each and every day you have to bring your value system. Your mother used to say to you all, what's the expression she used to say?
Bring them to your home.
Bring them to your home. And I think that's important. I think that's the kind of revolutionary thought process that we have to have.
And to that end, there's so much we can take from your generation, right? Because we can say that you all witnessed leadership up close, unapologetic, what it meant to put it on the line, what it meant to take up arms, what it meant to put your literal life on the line. What do you think to that end that maybe your generation missed passing down?
Ooh, that's a great question. And I'm going to do it a strange way, because I don't want to do it the way other people would do it. When I was a kid, well, I'll do it this way. We miss passing down. We miss the concept that you may not get it. We miss the concept that because there was a civil rights movement, because there was a Black Power movement, that the empire wouldn't strike back. And the prelude to the empire striking back was marginal acceptance. Bring you in, it's easier to cut your throat when they bring you in. All right? So instead of desegregation, they gave you integration. But it was integration of your dollar. You brought your dollar to the table. You brought black dollars to the table. In 55, when Sidney Poitier got the contract to go to Hollywood as the first black major star, there were black theaters. By the end of 55, there were no more black theaters. Jackie Robinson got integrated into the major leagues. By the time Jackie got in the major leagues, all the black players were trying to do what? Get into the major leagues. And now you have no more Negro League. So all those people who would be employed in concession and uniforms and balls and bats and all that kind of stuff that were owned and controlled by black people were gone, because they were allowed to integrate as opposed to desegregate. Desegregation meaning, if I want to go here, I can go here.
Right.
Integration mean you accepted into this. White folks never integrated, so you get a clear understanding. They never accepted integration, but they accepted you being integrated, because that means you brought your dollars to them.
Yeah.
So then, therefore, there will be no more Tulsa, Oklahomas. There'll be no more Elaine, Arkansas. There'll be no more Atlanta, Georgias the way they were before. There'll be no more Tuskegee. What's the brother from Tuskegee? Booker T. Washington's. There'll be no more of that. Independent thinking, moving independently, etc. Now, you obviously have the Nation of Islam came along, etc., other organizations that tried to emulate that. But that's the part that didn't get transferred from my generation to the next generation because of the success, the integration. I'll give you an example. Black Power, when Stokely said Black Power in 68, he was talking about black people being in control of their own destiny,
Right.
Their own economics, their own communities, because he was following the lead of Malcolm, who had said the same or similar thing back in 63 with the message to the grassroots. So you see the transfer from Malcolm to Stokely. The next person to define black power was who? Richard Nixon. He said black power was economic power. So they began to open up things called affirmative action programs and begin to draw black people into the economy. And so when black people got jobs, just like you were saying earlier, I got a good job. You know what I mean? And I'm not calling them house Negroes or anything like that. I'm just saying that the metaphor of the house Negro is one of the things that helped turn off the revolutionary fire.
Right.
And so when I say the Empire Strike Back, when they recognized that they could buy black people off, the next thing was to make sure that they never came out of it again, was to eliminate free colleges. That's Ronald Reagan. But what else did Ronald Reagan offer? Ronald Reagan is the one who ushered crack cocaine into the United States and into Southern California. Ronald Reagan is the one who targeted particular groups that's where you get your Crips and your Bloods, who were once community rescuers, but because of the money, the economics of it, they became gangs. So that was the Empire Striking Back. This was planned. I mean, I'm telling you, there's a video out there right now that talks about crack cocaine 10 years before it hit the street that was being tested at UCLA. And where did crack hit?
Southern
California, right where UCLA is. So that's the part that didn't, because we got a group that came up after the Civil Rights Movement, consistent with the Civil Rights Movement, with some of the leadership in the Civil Rights Movement, some of the leaders in the Black Power movement, that felt like integration and the various laws that came about by virtue of the Civil Rights Movement was acceptance. And so therefore they educated the community into acceptance. I mean, I'm not a big Jesse Jackson fan, but I was out there screaming, "Run, Jesse, run." Right? He came to Elizabeth. He came to Elizabeth, my hometown. I was screaming, "Run, Jesse, run." But then he took all that energy and gave it to the Democratic Party. And you see how the Democratic Party has treated black people ever since. Because it was acceptance. They felt they were assimilated, that they were in. You were never in. You were only marginal, and you can never get higher than white supremacy says you can be. And that's the part that they didn't get, so they never transferred the revolutionary fire back to the people so that they could progress and move forward. You know, so
it's an interesting, it's an interesting thing, because like I said, it seems so long ago that energy was like alive. But then again, we also know that to that end, everybody wasn't outside. Everybody wasn't fighting the power. Some folks was like, y'all crazy. You know what I mean? And because I get it now. You know what I mean? We can't even get people to rally behind deaths in our cities, specifically black folks, to say this is wrong.
And those who do, or at least give you a voice on it, will say that it's as almost as black people earned it. That we need to look. We focus on black crime and all that. Those kind of foolish arguments that are out there. Yeah.
And I can almost say, I mean, you were raised in Elizabeth, New Jersey. You were raised in the hood. I'm raised in PG County, right, where you see what it looks like to have black affluence, what it looks like to have some semblance of money. That wasn't necessarily our side of PG, but I'm just saying overall.
But that was your side of being raised. You were raised not to know you wasn't broke. Right. My behind was broke. You all never had to be broke.
But in that, right, you recognize where having things almost restricts you from wanting to do anything outside of the line, because you don't want to lose your things. Right. You don't want to give up that government cushy job. Right. You can put your kids through school, maybe, potentially, possibly. And that cycle of seeing that here, of like having conversations. I remember the first time I thought I was going to rage against the machine in high school. I was going to fight the good fight. I'm sending an email. I felt this thing was racist, that y'all did. And I remember the people that I was speaking on behalf of, who I thought were my peers, when we got into the office, they were like, we ain't never say that. Why would you say that on behalf of us? Because we didn't never say that. And I was like, whoa, thinking that I'm speaking up for us. I'm doing this thing for us, and I'm fighting the good fight. And that was my first example as a teenager of recognizing that when people have their crumb, they gonna hold on to that crumb.
Right.
And they don't want you moving or shaking any table that could potentially remove that little bit of crumb.
Right. That's our loss. That's my generation's loss. That's my generation's failure. That generation that we gave birth to the next generation, that 80s generation, let that complete generation down because we felt like we had arrived in America. But that's when mass incarceration came along, etc. But it was the people who had seized the leadership were all those people who had their things, who had their crumbs.
Yeah.
You know, who benefited from the Civil Rights Act, who felt they benefited from the Civil Rights Act, who felt they benefited from the Voting Rights Act, who felt they benefited from the Immigration and Naturalization Act, the new people coming into the country who were doctors over in whatever Pakistan, and they come to America and they think that somehow that's better. And you got a better education because now you live in PG County as opposed to First Street and Elizabeth, and you think you have something better. I remember taking your brother down to, he was walking, I was coaching him in AAU, right? They could have been about 11, 12 years old, him and his boys. They wanted a team, so I put him in a couple of leagues, etc. And I could see the swag. They started walking like they had some swag. I'm like, these are PG Negroes. These are like bougie, that. So I put them all in the bus and took them to Elizabeth, New Jersey, and dropped them off at the center on First Street. Man, they came out of that place shaking like they ain't seen hard. So I made them walk from there through South Park Street. Now, you know what South Park was like back in the day when they were kids. It was the number one drug-infested neighborhood in there. But I grew up on that street. So people's like, hey, Muhammad, I remember your brother saying to me, Dad, the crackheads is Muslims too? That kind of thing. But I wanted him to get the experience. Brother, I'm working my behind off so you don't have to go through the experience that I have. So take my experience, all right, and add it to your experience. You got a benefit that I didn't have, all right? And I'm not complaining about the way I grew up. In fact, I think it was brilliant the way I grew up. But the point is, I saw some things that you may not have ever seen because my goal was to shield you from that kind of situation in the hope that, one, I could explain it to you, and then you could embrace it and then move on and maybe move the lever a little bit further on. And that's what I think that we didn't do because we bought into the government, we bought into the country, and when the empire struck back, we were in the lead of complaining about crack being on the streets and we got to lock these Negroes up. I know it was Joe Biden and Bob Dole and Hillary Clinton talk about super predators, but it was black mayors saying that same nonsense about super predators and this kind of stuff. And frankly, there were some super predators because they bought into the same myth that it's about getting mine, it's about getting paid and all that kind of nonsense, as opposed to a collective effort to come out of a system that had been stepping on your mom and your dad and your grandpa since 1619. That message wasn't transferred, and I think my generation dropped the ball on that. It's unfortunate, but I think that's the way it's gonna. I think that's the way it's gonna write history because that left your generation with crack babies as a feature, and trying to figure out all over again how do you get back to black power as a discussion, as the black unity as a discussion.
Yeah, I think it's to that end as well. I think entertainment has become our kryptonite. I think we started to see this surgence of black wealth through entertainment. So we get to see a Oprah is a billionaire, a Tyler Perry is a billionaire, a Beyonce is a billionaire, Jay-Z is a billionaire. And now our aspirations are very different because now you too, you cannot. Let me just say you cannot. That shouldn't be the goal. And if that is the goal, you know what I mean? We ain't got no black hospitals, no black grocery stores, and I mean overall nationwide.
Right.
I mean a widespread of a chain of black-owned grocery stores, a chain of black-owned, and when I bring up these conversations of quote-unquote black wealth, right, and what it hasn't done, people be like, well, they bombed Tulsa.
Right.
And I'm like, do we not know how to rebuild? Do we not know how to then, and it goes back to where you're saying sometimes you just gotta revolt. And then to my point of sometimes you all need the education of really understanding that a part of the rebuild, right, is educating ourselves to understand what was at play there, how we then protect ourselves as well.
Right.
Right? Because you can have the builders and you can have the talented 10th and you can have those things, and you can also have Second Amendment people. And you can also have the steppers, the
That's
people
right.
that is willing to put it on the line. And I think my generation is very aspirational. I think we want the things. And that's just that.
Right.
And it's hard to be out here now with a spirit of a yesteryear that you're trying to bring into 2025, where people will see something happen to someone like George Floyd, a person that looks like them, a father, but still have the same narrative as white folks.
Right.
You know what I mean? And I'm not even going to say what those are, but those are the things that our folks will say. We had in D.C. 3 black men killed by federal agents and MPD within a 4-day span. And when I made a video about it on social media, our folks were in the comments. Well, let's see what they did. Maybe. I was like, what?
Yeah.
Ain't no way.
Yeah.
Ain't no way. But that's where we are, and that's where I say, you know, with being out here, I feel like I'm in a yesteryear. I feel like I am talking in circles because I don't, or screaming into the void, which is why I call you. You know, because I'm like, maybe I'm missing something, or maybe my generation is missing something to where they need to understand what's really at stake, and that what it is that they see as progression is still here.
Right. I think that's the most important thing that we've talked about as it relates to generations, is the comment you just made of generations have to understand what's at stake. It's not just a simple matter of your job. It's a matter of the next generation, losing the next generation. We saw it happen with mass incarceration. We almost lost an entire generation. 2.5 million people incarcerated during that time frame, from the time that crack hit the streets till the time that somebody finally said we're going to do something about it in the late 1990s. So you're talking about maybe from 75 till like 95. With nothing but mass incarceration, stop and frisk, racial profiling, all those things that hit our community like a ton of bricks. But that was systemic. All right. The same thing with the attack on the Voters' Rights Act that's going on now, the attack on civil rights that's going on right now. These are all things about the empire striking back. And I tell you guys all the time, go back to 68. That's when all these organizations in white supremacy America were formed on the heels of the riots, the so-called riots, or the so-called rebellions in 68 and the assassination of Dr. King and Bobby Kennedy. That's when they were revving up to strike back. And that's why you have drugs in your city. It's not just a matter of that drugs make money. It was to stop the next opportunity for a movement. And so they completely shut down a whole generation for 20 years. And black people went along with it because they had their things. And so the generation that was educated out of that generation is not the generation that came from the hood hungry. You know, hungry for learning, hungry for businesses. They let mom and pop stores go so that they could create Targets. These big box stores came in and moved them out.
Oh, Target.
Right? This is the history. But we have to realize that's what's at stake. That's what's at stake. The next generation is literally on the line right now. And so if that doesn't call you to change the way you see the world, or at least evaluate the world with the idea that my grandchildren are on the line right now, or my children are on the line right now, as opposed to me, if that doesn't call you to it, then fine. You might be screaming into a void. Dr. King screamed into a void. Malcolm screamed into a void. Jamil screamed into a void. You just got to keep screaming because the struggle continues. It has to continue. You know, there has to be people screaming into the void because eventually somebody will get it, or some people, some group will get it.
I think there's but there's a quote that I often like. I watched Tupac say, and I probably don't remember it verbatim, but he says, he's doing an interview and he says, I may not be the person to change the world, but I'm going to spark the brain of the person who will change the world. I think I approach things with that energy of like, not that I've given up on my generation, because obviously I wouldn't do social media. I wouldn't say the things that I say. I would go get my things, right? Because I could do that too. Like I know how to get money like anybody else. But I haven't given up, but I am at the juncture of wondering what it's going to take. And to that point, you know, if there's a message that you have to my generation of next steps, right? What is it that they can take away from your generation in this time, in this digital age, in the social media age? What can they take away?
If you believe, this is going to sound really silly because that's how I am sometimes. You know how I get. If you believe that grandma's potato salad is better than yours, then you might believe that grandma's common sense is better than yours. So listen to her. If you believe that grandpa's bean pie is as good as it's ever been, then maybe you need to listen to grandpa on some other things. Because what they have been through, you can gain from. Right? They are past the process of, we are past, my generation's past the process of you educating me to what's going on in the streets. You can educate me on Facebook and technology. I still tell people all the time, I got an 8-track in my car. You know what I mean? And most kids don't have a clue what an 8-track is. But the point is that the necessity for you to reach back and say, what was it like? Why did you all do this? What was your thought process on it? And again, like you said, everybody's not a rebel. Everybody's not a rabble rouse. Everybody's not in the streets. Some people did not support Brown versus Board. Black people were against it. In fact, the majority of black people were against Brown versus Board because they were like, we don't want to integrate with white folks. We want the money, the equal opportunity that the money comes into our schools so we can raise our own kids. And so the integration was a white folks' creation because they didn't want to give the money to black schools. Because black schools was producing Carter G. Woodsons. You know what I mean? They were producing the real McCoys and stuff like that. So to kill that, they came up with integration. But that's the history that, if you understood it, then you would know what's at stake because you would know who the enemy is and how much the enemy needs to stay in power by the system that they created. It was created for them to be in power. My question to your generation would be, do you think that you can function in this culture the same way that Europeans function in this particular culture? And if you do, why? That's what I would ask anybody in your generation. What is it about the history that would demonstrate to you that you could function the same way in this culture that they do?
And to that end, I would say my message to your generation would be open up and tell your grandchildren, tell your children the truth of what your experiences are. I think I can take pride in being a millennial where I feel we're a healing generation. We're going to therapy. We're trying to identify things that maybe we experienced, right? And have a better understanding of that. I think your generation and boomers tend to like shy away from. Why you don't want to hear about that? We don't want to talk about that. It's like, no, talk about it.
Right.
Tell us the stories. Tell us what you experienced. Tell us the harm of what that meant. Tell us why you got up north. Tell us why you went out west. So that we have it and understand that it wasn't just some natural migration of, I just went to get a better job, but you were chased out of somewhere. And we all have that story in our lineage somewhere, but somewhere there are also holes where my generation doesn't know what it is that was experienced and how it is that then we can pick up the torch to not then experience it again.
Right.
And so to that end, we're coming to the end. I will say, in plugging myself, social media, follow me everywhere on She is Imani B. I want to shout out our engineer, Marcus. I want to shout out to Anwa and the Movement Podcast Studio in DC. It is a Black-owned space. So if you are in DC, you need a podcast studio, look up Movement Podcast Studio. Again, thank you all for tuning in. Dad, plug. Make sure you let them know where it is that they can find you.
Absolutely. You can catch me every Thursday night from 8 to 10 at HSRN.com for the Raw Law Project. By By the way, shout out to my team. I know they're going to be listening to this. I'm coaching a mock trial team at CMIT. They're going to do some real damage this year, inshallah. And again, I have no idea why I'm on social media. Imani dragged me in here kicking and screaming, and she has that unfortunate Delaware State shirt on. So I figured I had to come in here and represent a real university in order to make her, so that she wouldn't be looking too bad on international media. So I hope those of you who recognize, that I'm really just here to rescue her.
Another conversation for another day.